I'm glad to welcome you to Zoom to Success, teaching screen magnification programs for low vision. I want to start by introducing our Lighthouse for the Blind CLVP staff. So first of all, we have John Thompson, the president of the Lighthouse, who is behind the camera tonight. I don't think you get
Actually, off to the side.
Okay, off to the side. And in the back, we have Jennifer Coy, who's the director of our program, and Ashley Beeman, who is another teacher like myself with the program. All three of Jennifer, Ashley, and I are certified teachers of students with visual impairments, certified low vision therapists, and certified orientation mobility specialists, just because we like lots of words. So I have a little bit more about my background because you have to listen to me. So I have experience working with infants through adults who have visual impairments. I have mostly worked in school districts as an itinerant teacher of students with visual impairments. I've worked both in Texas and Missouri. And I have a visual impairment myself. I have nystagmus from infancy. I also have strabismus. So I am a full-time screen magnification user for all of my computer use for home and for work. So this is a topic that's close to my heart. To talk about the objectives, at the end of this presentation, learners will be able to identify multiple reasons why it is important to teach screen magnification software, list choices of screen magnification programs and resources for acquiring them, and describe strategies for instruction. Just to kind of talk about our frame of reference for this presentation, we are focusing on screen magnification programs, things like Zoom Text and Magic and Windows Magnifier. We are not focusing on screen readers like JAWS and NVDA and Window Eyes. I will later on talk a little bit about the differences and when you might incorporate both or transition between them. We are also focusing on students with low vision. For the purpose of this presentation, I'm defining that as students who have a visual impairment but still primarily use the computer visually. And this is mainly targeted toward teachers, but I know that we have people in a few different roles here, and I'm hopeful that we'll still address your needs. Feel free to ask questions to make sure we do that. And just to give you a little encouragement, I don't know if you remember from the flyer, but this was for beginner and intermediate skill level. The reason I pointed that out is I don't want people to feel self-conscious about asking questions. I was appreciative of the questions we had in the surveys, and I welcome more as we go on. I am not endorsing a specific product, and I have no commercial interest in any of these. And just a quick thank you for those of you who responded to the survey with your questions and concerns. I think that most of those questions are addressed in the presentation. A few were maybe specific enough that I might need to address those on the side with you, and you're welcome to approach me and ask what you need. So what we're covering tonight, we have why teach these programs, programs and resources overview, a hands-on time that focuses on practicing general skills and comparing your programs, a discussion of key commands and screen reading features and full screen readers, another hands-on time that works on using key commands and exploring screen reading features, and then we'll focus on instructional ideas and goals after that, and we'll close with a question and answer. So, the foundational question is, why do we teach screen magnification programs? I believe they're very important to enable students to learn alongside their peers. Our kids as early as kindergarten have regular computer lab time or access to computers in their classrooms. And if their peers are able to access that, we need to make sure we're bridging the gap so they're able to progress alongside them. Honestly, it's also important skills to have for local and or state testing. I realize that the MAP testing has built-in options that address vision. There are some special occasions where you might still need something beyond that to be included as an accommodation, but a lot of the local testing, computer-based options aren't accessible. So we want to make sure that's on board for our kids. I also believe that screen magnification is important for managing eye fatigue. This is certainly a big factor for me. And I think that it enables students to use good posture and working distance. If a student can see the computer, and they might insist to you that they can see the computer, but they can see it at 4 inches or 3 inches, Imagine sustaining that in a high school day where they have their computer out all day, every day for class, and how that feels for your body. And screen magnification programs also have a tremendous expanded core curriculum impact. I could talk about that all day, but just to touch on them. Think about the social interaction skills it's related to because of how much everything goes through technology now. Recreation and leisure skills, orientation and mobility skills for accessing maps or planning travel or buses. Obviously assistive technology skills, independent living skills because you need to be able to pay your bills. You need to be able to look up recipes. And so that really is necessary to bring in to meet all our needs. Most importantly, I believe computer use is critical for post-secondary education and work. If we're setting our kids up to be successful, we need to give them the tools they need so that when they walk in the door to those settings, they're ready to go. Common reasons that they're not taught. I want to point out that in including this, I'm not saying that I'm not criticizing people that have said these things, but I have some different thoughts about them. So I hear sometimes that students can use Control plus and minus or program Zoom settings such as the Zoom within Microsoft Word and or pinch to Zoom. And those can all be helpful to supplement, but there's sometimes some efficiency problems with that. For example, when you use pinch to Zoom, it may take you some time to try to drag around the screen to get where you need to be. I also have an example on our next slide about why maybe Control plus and minus or the program Zoom doesn't quite cut it for us. Sometimes I hear from the student, the parent, or the teacher that they do fine on the computer. I would like to tell you a little story about that. When I was in high school, I was extensively involved in computer classes and extracurricular activities that required computer use. And when my teacher's students with visual impairments came to me, I said, I do fine on the computer. I do all these things we talked about in bullet 1, and that's all I knew. But the first time I got shown Zoom text while I was transitioning from high school to college, I said, oh, wow. And I have never stopped using it since. If I had been shown it earlier, I think I would have happily jumped on that bandwagon and saved myself some eye fatigue through the years. I also feel a little uncomfortable when we say a student's vision is quote unquote too good. I am definitely, as far as visual acuity goes, on the highest functioning end of low vision. I'm very blessed, and I still use screen magnification all the time. And the reason is to manage eye fatigue, as we already talked about, and some of those other things like good posture. So don't just make a blanket statement about it. Maybe try it with the child before you make a decision. Sometimes student feedback during the first session is negative, and that's enough to put the brakes on it. I have some insight later on about ideas to help out with that. Sometimes students have frustration with the default settings. The number one thing is, I hate that voice of Zoom text. Well, guess what? We can turn it off and we can leave it off if that's what we need to do. So get the default settings the way they need to be. We talk about that later too. Finally, honestly, sometimes the teacher feels uncomfortable with it or unfamiliar. This can mean that they don't necessarily push it as hard with their students, or maybe even accidentally project a negative attitude, and maybe discourage the student a little bit about that. So this is my example of what Program Zoom and enlarged font can do for you. So I've zoomed in on Microsoft Word to 200%, and I've used a large font, so I can see that text wonderfully. If I was just writing an essay and all I had to do was write, I'd be in good shape. Trouble is, nothing at the top is enlarged. So anything I need to do in my menus and my ribbons, any formatting I need to do, those are not available to me without having to look very closely, or if I had less vision, maybe not available at all. That bottom taskbar is also not accessible with these settings, so you can see. It'd be really hard to tell the time. It would be really hard to see what programs I had open. So the screen magnification software gives you that opportunity to have everything on the screen magnified. You just have to move around your screen to get to it. So that you didn't just hear my opinion tonight, I asked for input from the Lighthouse for the Blind employees who are adults We had 4 people participate. They're all working in professional roles like marketing and customer service and accounting. I asked them which programs they use frequently. We had 1 for Magic, 3 for Windows Magnifier, and 3 for Zoom Text. You will notice that adds up to more than 4. There are people who are using multiple ones, and they gave me a couple of their reasons for that. One is needing more advanced color options that were available through Zoom Text but not available through Windows Magnifier for them. Another one was only having Windows Magnifier at home. These are expensive programs, so sometimes when you get into adulthood and you're having to pay for them yourself, it may be worth you having them at work. Maybe your business will pay for them, but it is not worth you spending that amount of money at home if you're able to make Windows Magnifier work for you. So I asked them how important using screen magnification software is for completing these tasks. This was on a scale of 0 to 5, with 5 being critical. So first of all, computer use for entertainment, so that's our recreation and leisure and social skills, is 3.25. Computer use for work for necessary home tasks was 4, and for their job at Lighthouse for the Blind was 4.5. So that shows how important each of these adults feels like that software is in their lives to give them access to these different aspects. I talked to them about when to teach these programs. We were comparing when they learned them versus when they thought they should be taught. 3 people learned them in college and post-secondary, and 1 learned them on the job. The difference is that 2 people felt like that people should learn them in an elementary school setting. If I had taken the survey, I would have also chosen this. 1 person said college and post-secondary, and 1 person said on the job. My concern with the college and the post-secondary and on the job setting is that I would rather my students have what they need when they walk in the door for those, because they're going to be overwhelmed anyway when they're making a transition to those settings. So I don't want you to both be having to learn how to function in the workplace and learn a software program all at the same time. They gave us some great tips for teachers. So one is to allow children to play with different settings of magnification and also give them the opportunity to explore using it with different uses, such as entertainment and social media. Another said I would suggest that teachers learn how to use the programs to better understand what the students are experiencing. Some features work great and others take some getting used to or some tweaking to make them work for the individual. The student may need help learning what features are available and how to use them effectively. The third comment was these programs aren't perfect, which is true. It's important for our kids to understand that and us to understand that, because we will sometimes have to work around things. Finally, we had 2 different respondents comment on how it was helpful to use a larger screen, because that let them use less Zoom so they could see more of the screen at once. This is a really great strategy for home and for work. Sometimes it's not as feasible in a school setting. You may have a student going in between 8 classes, and it might be hard to provide access to a larger monitor. If it's absolutely necessary, you could think about having a monitor in a central location for them, but you may choose to use some workarounds to not have to have that large monitor. So let's talk about some trends in the industry. We have gotten greatly improved built-in and free options in the past few years. And we also are beginning to have improved screens. 4K screens are a big breakthrough in terms of clarity. They're actually becoming available on laptop screens. Some of your higher-end laptops have them now. I got one for a student, and we used Windows Magnifier just to test it out on there. And normally, on the screens I'm used to using, Windows Magnifier struggles quite a bit after you get past 300%. On this, it continued to look crisp and clear as we increased the magnification. So I'm excited to see where those will go in terms of having our kids not have to deal with as much pixelation when they're trying to look at something. We also have a merger of Freedom Scientific and AI Squared that brings together the 2 parent companies of Magic and Zoom Text, which are by far and away the programs that have the biggest market share in our country. This is exciting because hopefully we could get a blending of the features of both programs. Maybe we could even get Zoom text on quota phones. All these things are hypothetical. It's a little scary because there's not as much competition. So I don't know if long run we might see some price increase. I hope not. Obviously, touchscreens have become very common in the past few years on laptops and monitors and all-in-one computers. That impacts the features these programs offer, and it may change your decision about which one's right for you. Chromebooks have become popular in a lot of districts, so that's definitely something we will go on to address. A lot of our survey respondents said they wanted to hear more about that. And tablets. So we have our 2-in-1 tablet. That picture shows you an example of a convertible one. And then you have students who maybe are using tablets exclusively, like iPads. We're not addressing the iPads and things like that, but what we talk about today will apply to your convertible 2-in-1 Windows tablets. So, our premium screen magnification programs. First, we have Zoom Text, which offers 3 versions: Magnifier, Magnifier Reader, and Fusion. Next, we have Magic, which offers no speech and speech. They rely on JAWS to be a full screen reader if you want that. And finally, we have Supernova, which has Magnifier, Magnifier and Speech, and Magnifier and Screen Reader. These are not an exhaustive list. There's a few other programs out there, but these are the ones that are the most household names in our industry. Talking about free or built-in programs. This is what will make you like me, right? So, as I said earlier, Windows Magnifier has improved a ton. Beginning with Windows 7, we got a full screen magnifier, which was a big breakthrough because, as I mentioned down there, I don't suggest using a lens mode for most students. I've literally never had a student who chose that. They usually want full screen. So the Chromebook magnifier is also helpful if you are on a Chromebook platform. It has some glitches, so you have to be aware you'll have to have some patience. But it's very usable. We'll talk a bit more about that. And then you can use Zoom on Mac. And there had been some freeware out there, but it seems like this category may be getting phased out because of how many good built-in options there are. There's not as many things to download online that are free, and they're a lot of times outdated. They may only offer a lens mode. And your technology department may not like you too well if you say, oh, well, I want to download this executable file off this website that they're not too sure about. So those might not always be the best choice. Presley did a great analysis of them a few years ago, so I'd like to refer you to his article if you're still interested in hearing more about that category. As I mentioned, Chromebooks were a big subject of interest for people, and we, as a low vision clinic, kind of have an opinion about what we recommend first. So what I prefer you do, if it's an option within your district, is buy a PC, because you'll still be able to access all of those Google-based apps, because those are all web-based. But you'll also still be able to install extra software. So on a Chromebook, you can't add an external screen magnification software like Zoom Text. But on a PC, you could. I think you get, actually, in terms of building technology skills, you probably get more bang for your buck when you really think about it if you go ahead and spring for a PC, because you can also teach them some other more advanced programs. Second choice, if your district has really had to dig in their heels, is to buy a Chromebook with a 15-inch screen. They do come that big. This white one that's on the table over there, to the left of the PowerPoint, is a 15-inch Chromebook. And if you're especially interested in Chromebooks, that's available during our hands-on time. So the magnifier, as I mentioned, is useful, but it does have some glitches. So you may have some things where it bounces to a different part of the screen, or you have some trouble scrolling and you have to turn it off. It's really important to learn keyboard commands for the Chromebook magnifier. Those are included in your packet. You have a lot of command cheat sheets for pretty much everything in there. And the reason the commands are even more important for the Chromebook is that there's not an easily accessed magnifier interface like you might have with some of the other options. So you need to know those so you can quickly zoom in and zoom out. There are also helpful accessibility settings and extensions with the Chromebook. So you may increase your mouse size and your cursor size and those kind of things through your accessibility settings. But you may also find some extensions you like. For example, one that's mentioned in your handout about low vision in Chromebooks actually pulls out the text of a website and lets you make the text itself large print and takes out like the ads and the extra stuff that's on the sides. So the student can have the text the way they need if they're reading an article. My personal opinion from using our Chromebook that we try to use to model with students is that it is usable for students with higher functioning low vision. As a very, very rough rule of thumb, I would say, if you're better than 2200, I think that you would be able to make the Chromebook work. As you get worse acuity, it may be harder because the quality may not be there in the magnification for higher reading. So resources for purchasing. This is the other thing that will make you like me, right? So we have a great national resource now. Magic is now available through APH quota funds for students who are legally blind. This gives you 3 installations. The idea behind the 3 is that you have enough to install it twice at school and once at home. So you can make sure the student has it wherever they need. Some of our Missouri-specific programs is the Missouri Assistive Technology Reimbursement Program that is for schools. There is also the Missouri Assistive Technology TAP-I program, which can provide the software for home. In addition, we have the Lighthouse for the Blind Continuing Education Grant, which can be used for students who are legally blind to get equipment for home. Money-saving tips for stretching that budget dollar a little bit further. Bear in mind that you have multiple installations normally when you buy one license for screen magnification. Typically that means that you can install that copy on 3 computers. So you can cover that student, say they are in a classroom and then 2 other computer labs, you can meet their needs with just 1 license. You're not supposed to abuse that license and apply it to other students, and I'm not saying that you do that, but you don't need multiple licenses for 1 student. And at least with AI Squared, I haven't tried with the other companies, they tend to be real helpful if you need to pick up the phone and say, hey, that computer crashed, it had to be re-imaged, we lost our license on it, can we have additional licenses? If you explain what's happened, they can usually reset those installations for you. If you're a larger district, a better bang for your buck might be multiple user licenses. This is something I would definitely discuss with my technology program before I jumped the gun on that, because you want to make sure that they're willing to work with you and make it work with your network. Bear in mind that sometimes the pricing is also better through dealers than it is through the companies themselves. This might be a little counterintuitive to those of us who say, oh, well, I know what I need. I don't need to go through the middleman. But it's worth going through the middleman if he can save you a couple $100s. Another thing is that you may need to think about whether you need the enhanced service plan for Zoom Text. I'm not telling you yes or no, but this ups the price significantly. It gives you the next 2 updates, the next 2 upgrades. You get automatically, and you're supposed to also get some advanced level of customer service and technology troubleshooting. So you may think it's worth it, or you may not. If a couple $100s is going to decide whether you purchase the software or not, then you might skip this one. I would also consider built-in screen reading options if someone is only going to use the screen reader occasionally. So this is a person that may only want to listen to an article every once in a while or something like that. Then you could use narrator or voiceover and not spend $200 more for the version that has a reader instead of just the magnifier version. To walk you through the decision-making factors for ordering, I look first of all at tasks. What is this student actually going to use these things for? And what functionality do they need? What amount of Zoom do they need? They may be able to do better just fine with built-in Windows magnifier if they don't need too much magnification. If they're crossing past that, say 300% magnification, they may need a more advanced program just to not have it be as pixelated. The amount of use and frequency is important. I might make a different purchasing decision if I'm talking about a kindergartner who goes to the computer lab twice a week for 30 minutes than if I'm talking about a high schooler who's handling a heavy AP course load. So the number of computers also is important to bear in mind. That'll go back to your multiple installations and your possible district licenses. I would think about if you're wanting touchscreen functionality, there's a difference between the programs. And if you need enhancements beyond what's in the ease of access settings in Windows. So within ease of access, you can increase your mouse size, you can increase your cursor, you can increase your icons. For some people, that mouse still might not be visible enough. So that might be another reason that you want the program with some extra options. Although there are some other programs that solely give you a larger mouse, if that's the only thing you're worried about. I would think about whether my student had additional impairments. This might make you think that you need a simpler program. On the other hand, it might make you think you need some reader functions. I do live in reality, so I would think about funding options and make decisions that work the best for meeting all the students' needs. And I might think about that there could be a trade-off with using a less common product. If you're going to have tougher to reach customer service, or there's less resources out there to help you with instruction, that might not be the way you want it to go. Teaching multiple programs. Please don't throw things at me, but you have to teach more than one. It's necessary that a student learns how to use built-in screen magnification software, even if they have access to a premium program. The great news is that those skills will transfer. All you need them to do is learn a few more key commands, 3 or 4, and they're ready to go. But they'll still understand how to move around the screen, whether they've been primarily using Zoom text or primarily using Windows magnifier. They need that built-in option because there will be instances that they go somewhere like the library or grandma's house that they may not have access. There are USB versions of these programs, but sometimes there can be barriers to installing those even when you have a USB copy. So I think having the ability to just sit down at the library computer and hit Windows Plus and have magnifier pop up immediately is a great resource for our kids. Moving on to touchscreens. Most of the programs have built-in touchscreen support. Magic does not. So with Magic, you can still use your mouse and your computer will function fine. But if you touch the screen, your computer won't react to that touch. And I have confirmed that with the company. I suggest that you trial these options before making the purchase because there's some different variations in how they handle the interface. I have concerns about efficiency for using the screen magnification program through the touchscreen. I have absolutely no problem with my students having touchscreens. But I think if I'm doing all the swiping to move back and forth to read a whole article or edit a whole homework assignment, that's probably less efficient than if I just used my mouse. What I have suggested to my students is to control the screen magnification program with the mouse. So they're doing that movement around the screen with their mouse. But then they can touch the screen for anything they want to interact with the computer, like picking a program or a link or playing a game. So I think that honestly, don't have data to back that up, but I think for most kids that's going to be the best combination to make it work. So, building your own skills. Download a free trial of whichever software you're focusing on. We have several versions of software available to you tonight. I think most people already know in their program that they're maybe only interested in 2 or 3. Download what you need. And just like you will with your students, set a goal for minimum use. Say, I'm going to use this 15 minutes a day, every work day for the next 2 weeks. Using screen magnification programs requires flipping a mental switch. Almost everybody recoils when they first see them and says, wow, that's weird. But as you work with them, your mind learns how to work with it. If you don't spend the hands-on time with it, it won't make sense to you. And I suggest that you explore. Go through your program menus. See what's there. You're not going to break it just to look through the menus at the top bar of your interface. Also, go through the manual. I'm not saying to use it as bedtime reading. You can just glance through the table of contents and say, oh wow, I haven't heard of that before. Maybe they added a new feature with this version, and read about that new feature. I have to admit, I have felt pretty foolish when I've overlooked a thing or two and found out that there was a setting available to me that would have been helpful. So I can give you firsthand encouragement to do this. This brings us to our first hands-on time. So, did anybody have input for me from their experience with their magnification program? How'd you feel about it? Surrender.
Yeah, I didn't like the 4K screen.
Why don't you like the 4K?
Because Zoom text, the interface looks a little different, something that we're not used to seeing. You know, maybe they need to work on Zoom text for 4K resolution.
You're 100% right about that. And I talked to them because I was troubleshooting that issue, and they said they would be buying 4K screens for their developers to get on that. They're a little behind the ball on that, if you ask me. So that is a trade-off for your cutting-edge technology. We're a little bit on the bleeding edge in terms of low vision. Sometimes low vision takes a little while to catch up. So what they're saying, with the 4K screen, the user interface itself for Zoom text looks kind of all smashed together, which doesn't really make sense because it should be more spread out. But you can't actually get to anything you need anyway, so it's still usable. It's just a little ugly. But that's definitely an issue. There's a few other programs that when you use them on a 4K screen, they're still a little interesting to work around. So we've found that for sure. Anything else in terms of how it felt to move around the screen with magnification on? If you thought you were a lot slower, if you lost your place, anybody have stuff like that happen? Miss Gwen did?
I used a supernova, and I know it was kind of cool. It's just that I kept losing where I was at because it's so big.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some ideas about how to manage that and learn. You thought the same thing, Cindy?
Yeah, it was just moving around the screen was a lot more cumbersome, and then I would lose my Zoom text window and couldn't find it when I wanted to change. So
Yeah, and a good one if you need that to happen is for Zoom text. If you hit Alt Insert, if it's already running, it'll pop you up to the user interface. So if you're lost on your screen and you need your user interface, that won't work. We'll talk a little bit more about the hotkeys for everything. Anything else that people wanted to share?
It definitely is a practice thing, like you said.
Amen to that.
And, there's, your mouse too, it's just like, I do think you're only moving it a little bit. It's like, wait a minute, that's where I want to be over there.
Yeah, and I had a fun thing to happen that makes no sense at all. When my computer updated from Windows 7 to Windows 10 for work, my mouse got a lot more sensitive. my touchpad, and it took me a day or two to be better at Zoom text again because I felt like I was just starting out again because I was zooming around the screen a little too much.
So, did you miss something else?
Well, I was just going to ask, how is the Windows magnifier on the 4K screen? Have you tried it?
Yeah, actually, I've tried it at Best Buy. That's one thing that got me really interested in the Windows magnifier. If you ask Miss Lewin real nice, she might let you see the 4K screen she has with her. But it holds up really well. Like if you see it on a regular screen, it starts to really pixelate after 300% or so. But if you keep zooming in on Windows magnifier on a 4K screen, it looks much more crisp. So I'm sorry, I went backwards. came to mind to you, if you were able to try something that jumps out, feel free to add on. These programs are all comparably priced within $5 of each other as of October 2016. Drawbacks for these premium programs include that they each cost a lot more than a built-in option, which is free. And there is a lot slower startup. Once you have the program on, you don't see that difference, and that's fine. But if you're somebody who, for whatever reason, is needing to restart your computer often, you might get a little frustrated with that. Magic, the pros are especially strong for it being available on quota funds. Cons include that there are fewer advanced features. It has all those more basic features you need for sure. It's some of those more obscure features that you might not even need. It has somewhat less clear text, especially as you zoom in and in certain programs, and there's no touchscreen support at this time. Supernova, the pros are, I believe it has the best touchscreen access. It's the most intuitive. When you're using it, you can just move around the screen and also touch and have it work. On Zoom Text for touchscreen, you have to actually switch between two modes. A mode where you're interacting with Zoom Text and a mode where you're interacting with the computer. And that can kind of get tedious and confusing. Although if you do the trick I said of using the mouse for Zoom Text and your finger for other things with the computer, you can get around that. Supernova also has good clarity. I feel like when I compare them side by side, the clarity of Supernova is comparable to Zoom Text. Some cons are that it's less common. It's more of a European product, so it's used much less in the United States. It's not on quota funds, and as I found out today, it's hard to reach the customer service in the United States. Although I will give them credit that they eventually got back to me via email. But I couldn't get anybody on the phone. So Zoom Text is honestly the pretty accepted industry standard. It has extensive advanced features. Some of those might not be applicable to your student. It has very good clarity compared to some other products. A big con is that it's not available on quota funds. So, moving on to key commands. I think these are going to help you a lot next time you try the computer. Key commands are critical for increasing students' efficiency. I think any student who's using screen magnification can benefit from key commands. Just take this example. I've written my Word document, I need to save it. If I'm using a screen magnification program, I'm having to move my mouse really far to get to that top left corner where that save button is. Whereas if I just hit Control-S to save, I've instantly saved, I haven't lost where I was on the screen, and I haven't wasted the time to find that button. I think that key commands become even more important when you're using a high level of Zoom. And that I'm talking about, your 4X, your 5X, you really need to start incorporating as many key commands as possible. If a student has problems staying oriented, I've had some students that I had to work with quite a bit, and maybe they weren't even using that much Zoom, but for some reason their concepts weren't as good or whatever, they lost their orientation. You can use commands to jump around the screen, and those can help you stay oriented. If a student has orthopedic issues that impact the use of a mouse, then that may be even more important too. I firmly believe that using key commands increases acceptance of these programs. I think you'll see that when you try your second hands-on time. But if I'm a student and I learn just a few key commands, I learn how to zoom in and zoom out quickly, and I learn how to enable or disable my Zoom where the program is still running in the background, I'll be a lot happier because that'll let my teacher walk by and glance at my work and let my friend who's doing a group project with me be able to look at it real quick. And I'm not having to go find that user interface and figure out what I need on it. There's no quicker way to make a student mad than when they've had it on a high level of Zoom to navigate the internet. They got to that game website they wanted, they found that game, and it is way too zoomed in for that game. So knowing the key command to zoom out real fast and have some fun is a great way to increase acceptance. You have to explain your modifier keys when teaching key commands. When I say key commands, I mean the same thing as hotkeys, keyboard shortcuts. All those are interchangeable terms. So modifier keys are things like Control or Shift or Alt that you're pressing with another key to give the computer a command instead of type something. Just teach what's relevant to your student. Don't overwhelm yourself or them with a stack of commands that they don't even need. They'll retain what they use, so teach them what they're using, not something that they're not using right now. Let them suggest new commands to learn. For example, I've had a student that was really motivated to work with formatting in a document, so she wanted to know some more commands for that, and that was something that got her engaged. Making up funny stories or sayings is a good way to remember commands. One of my favorite stories that's kind of gross is an assistive technology instructor from the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired told me, if you're trying to remember Control V being paste, which doesn't make sense to anybody because they would assume it's Control P, which is print, you can just remember that you want your computer to vomit back up whatever you're putting on the screen. Your elementary school age boys will never forget that command in their whole life. So I like to practice using age-appropriate fun activities with our little ones. You wouldn't believe how fun Simon Says makes things. I can tell you to do things on the computer all day long if Simon tells you to do it. And for your older ones, internet research on a preferred topic is a great idea. Another suggestion from our survey respondent was that social media or entertainment. Of course, if you're doing those kind of things, you need to be conscious of what's school appropriate. Also, if anything comes to your mind or your student's mind that you want to learn, there is probably a command for that. And just search it on the internet. One of my favorite stories is I was working with a 5th grader who's functionally blind, and she was asking me during a lesson, hey, Miss Jones, what's the command for blah, blah, blah? And I said, I don't know, but I'll look that up for you. And so she kept working, and I got on my computer and I looked it up. And I told her later, hey, that command you asked about is this. And she said, so Miss Jones, did you get on your computer and go to Google and type in keyboard command for blah, blah, blah? And I said, yes, that's exactly what I did, and you can do it too. So I don't want my students to think I know everything. I want them to know I have to look things up and they can look things up too. It's okay. So I would like to discuss our keyboard commands in a couple different categories. One is the screen magnification program commands. So those are your things like your zoom in, your zoom out, enable and disable zoom that I mentioned, moving the focus that I touched on slightly. You can jump center, you can jump left, right, top, bottom. You can use your reading commands. It's a lot less tedious if you use a command to launch the reader while you're in the middle of your task than if you have to go back to the user interface. You may want to learn commands to manage enhancements. I think this would usually be your color enhancement because I think normally you're going to pick your cursor and your mouse that you always want. But you may be somebody who benefits from a different color filter. But when you want to see that picture, you want to switch back to normal color. Operating system and program commands. So operating system examples could go on for days. They include using the Windows key for the start menu, Alt-Tab to switch between open programs, Windows D to jump to the desktop. Program examples also could go on forever, but they include Control P for print, Control S for save, Control C for copy, and if you're in an internet browser, Alt D to access the address bar. So, screen readers versus screen magnifier. So as we have already discussed, screen magnifiers include Magic, Zoom Text, Supernova, and more. There are then screen magnifiers with reader support. These can read documents for you. They can read what your mouse hovers over and do other reading tasks. They do not read everything on the screen that you need to be able to access if you're not using your vision. Then you have screen readers, which read everything that's necessary to operate the computer without using vision, in theory. Sometimes there's problems. And they support Braille displays. So your reader support, your Zoom Text magnifier reader will not give you that Braille support. Screen magnifiers with full screen readers. This is a progress that's just been made in the last couple of years. We now have Zoom Text Fusion, Supernova magnifier and screen reader, and you could use Magic and JAWS together to get the same effect. These are a good compromise for some students, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. screen reading functions within screen magnification programs. The benefits include typing feedback. You can say what letters and words you've typed. It can manage eye fatigue. Say you have a student who's in 11th grade and has a heavy reading load for classes. Having a reader read some of those articles they got on the internet can be really helpful to manage that eye fatigue. It can help with reading efficiency depending on a student's visual reading speed. The auditory reading using their listening skills may actually work faster. This isn't true for every student, so you have to kind of keep track of that. It can help for editing. A lot of kids catch their mistakes a lot better when they hear what they wrote than when they just look at it visually. Deciding factors. I would first of all think about their learning media, including their interest in and ability to listen to electronic voices. Some students are very resistant to electronic voices. If that student doesn't have a compelling need for that reader, then maybe you can let that battle go. If they do, that might be something you have to fight about. Another thing to consider is academic demands and eye fatigue. Once again, we go back to that student with a real heavy course load versus maybe that early elementary school student who is needing to read visually to become a reader and we don't want all those screen reader functions on board yet. When to transition to full screen readers. This is a hairy one. You want to observe your students' efficiency on the computer. If you have extensively taught them how to use a screen magnification program and you watch them and it takes them 10 minutes to open up that website that it took everybody else to do, then you may need to start thinking about another strategy. Think about their classroom learning medium. If you have a student who is a Braille student in class, I get really worried if you don't have full screen reading options available to them. Because you're telling me that they either have so much eye fatigue or don't have the visual functioning to be able to sustain that visual reading. Why would that be different on the computer? Of course, you may have some kids who have Braille instruction in the mix that aren't using it as their main media that may not need it. Also think about your need for Braille support. If you want a Braille display available, you have to have a screen reader built in. A very, very general rule of thumb is that I start to get nervous at 5 or 6x and up. That's because people's efficiency really can go downhill at that point. I'm not telling you that's a rigid line in the sand, that if you hit that, you have to be on a screen reader, but definitely more key commands and be aware of maybe needing to make a change. Degenerative conditions often lead us down this road. They may start out as being able to access screen magnification and need to transition to a screen reader. A lot of people are resistant to this transition. They are fighting tooth and nail to use as much vision as they still have. And so one thing that can help with that is using one of these options that has both magnification and reading together so that they don't feel like you've just taken away their eyes by saying, oh, well, we're only going to use JAWS, sorry. Progressively introducing screen readers with screen magnification can help that. And you might kind of sneak in and gradually reduce your magnification so your students having to rely more on the reading to help build those skills. Screen magnification for a student who has meaningful vision is still a helpful support. So they may primarily be a JAWS user or something like that, but if they have enough vision that they may want to see that map for social studies or that picture for their literature book that they're reading online, then they would benefit from having a magnification option involved in the mix. So, we're on hands-on time number 2. I'm going to keep us strictly to 15 minutes on this because I want to make sure we have some time for questions at the end. Use your screen magnification key command cheat sheets in your resource packet to launch the screen magnification program and work with it. They're in there, I promise, for any program you want to run. Use your general basic keyboard commands to perform a task such as writing in Word, which you just did, so you can see the difference of what using the commands can do for you. Compare the speed of these using commands versus using the mouse, and if you have time, fiddle a little bit with the reader functions. I think some people may have already done that, which is fine. And then be prepared to provide feedback. Did anybody have input for me after they had that that second hands-on time? Maybe where you found the key commands were helpful, or you continued to have trouble with something, you explored reader functions, anything jump out to people? You ate a lot of cookies?
Well, we had problems because we had opened up, it's what happens when my students like, but I saved it, I'm like, no, you pointed to save it, you didn't choose it. You know, and that's what we were doing at Zoom, we had told it to do these commands, but it wasn't doing anything, and it just kept dinging us until, gosh, we actually opened up Zoom instead of just the help.
So it was probably popping up a dialog box for you and you weren't on that part of the screen. That's what you're explaining? Yeah, that happens to the best of us actually still, so it's a good skill for your kids to know. If they hear that ding, the computer is telling them something. That also might be where you learn your jump to center command, because usually your dialog boxes are going to pop up in the middle. So like with Zoom text, that's Alt and the number 5 on the number pad, but you have to have your num lock on to use that. So anything else that people want to mention? I know that being novices with the keyboard commands, they may not have felt like they went a lot faster. I think if you have real practice for your kids, you'll see a great increase in speed that way. And I've had some teachers who've learned them to teach kids, and then they say, I use them all the time for myself. It makes me faster.
I was just gonna say that's how I keep commands in my head, is I utilize them when I'm doing my billing, you know, report writing and such.
It's a good idea.
In my head.
So let's switch gears a little bit to focus on instruction. Your foundational skills, you need to build basic mouse pointer and clicking skills. If you have a student who's struggling with that, maybe because they're very young, there's an orthopedic impairment involved or something, you need to build those first. You may be able to do a variety of games on the internet or download something to promote that. You might also talk to your occupational therapist for ideas for that. You need to discuss basic computer concepts, the layout of the desktop and what's on the screen, and build vocabulary so that when you give them cues, they make sense to them because they know that vocabulary. We have a really good checklist that's included in your resource packet that will walk you through some of those things. So I'm not going to break that down step by step, but that's a good place to go. You need an orientation to the keyboard modifier keys and the concept of using key commands. So there's a program called Volleyland that's for young children who have visual impairments or are blind, and it's specifically designed to be engaging to help them practice those skills of exploring the keyboard and using the modifier keys. I'm not sure you necessarily need to spend $50 to do that, but it is a resource out there if you really have a kid you're having trouble getting going on it. I like to teach my young kids to do magic tricks. So they are infinitely amused when I say, let me show you my magic trick to make this happen on the computer, and they can do it instantly. So sometimes, yes, I'm cheesy, sometimes it works. Introducing screen magnification programs. These strategies obviously vary by age. First of all, when you open it up, have the student choose the default settings with you and make sure you save them as default. So you go into File in that program and you say Save Settings or Save as Default. That will cut down on your frustration when they open the program next time and it's already set all the way they need it, instead of them having to spend the first 5 minutes getting the settings the way they need. As I mentioned earlier, you can do that in order to begin with speech off, for example, so that your student isn't frustrated with that. Show the students a zoomed out view of the screen. Of course, you can only zoom out as far as their visual acuity allows you to, but they may be able to use a close viewing distance and see the zoomed out screen to get oriented, and then zoom in to give them what they need to use an appropriate viewing distance. Encourage them to use that strategy. Maybe they go to a website and they've never been there before and they're not sure how it's laid out and they need to know where that menu is. They can zoom out or maybe totally disable the zoom, figure out, oh, the menus are on the left-hand side, and then zoom back in so they can read the text on that. I suggest using a mouse to start instead of a touchpad. That would be why we have all those nice mice plugged into the computers you used. A touchpad is very usable long-term. I use a touchpad full-time, but I think when a student is first getting the motor skills of making sure they're where they want to be on the screen, you're gonna have less frustration with the mouse. Start on a low amount of zoom. I found my kids kind of do this for me. They start to say at 1.5 or 2x, oh, that's what I want, that's enough. And maybe their vision makes me think long-term, that's not enough. But right now when we're starting, and that's where they want to start at, I'm okay with starting on a lower zoom. And then as they make progress, I may encourage them, hey, let's try this zoomed in a little bit more and see if it helps them more. Start simply with moving in the correct directions and locating parts of the screen. Find the top, find the bottom, find the start menu, find the clock. Those are those basic skills of moving around that you can't do anything else until you have. Teach scanning patterns. You already teach these for magnifiers and telescopes. Same deal. I teach my students we go left to right and back down and right to left. And they, sometimes I'll use games to do that. Like for example, I use sight word bingo on ABC for that. That's listed on one of your resource pages of the fun website resources. You can think of things that help promote that pattern. Introduce basic magnification commands, You don't need to give them 50 commands, but just those few that you have on your cheat sheets there, or even fewer than what's on the cheat sheet, you may start with. Once again, as I mentioned earlier, I think knowing how to zoom in and zoom out, possibly disabling and enabling zoom, can help your student like using the program a lot better as they start. And just like we talked about for yourselves, set a minimum goal for your student. Say they're an older student that you try it with and they say, oh, I don't want that. You say, okay, I need you to try this for 10 minutes a day for the next 2 weeks, and then tell me whether you want it or not, and we'll talk about it further, because you need that time for that mental switch to kind of flip for you, for it to make sense. Lesson ideas. I've mentioned Simon Says. I love using games. It's amazing how interesting Simon Says and I Spy can make things for little kids. Using fun websites or internet games. I've mentioned you have a resource page that explains why I love using those and gives you some ideas. For a lot of teachers, these might not be new ideas, but I hope it's helpful. For older students, you can do internet research projects that are high interest, as I mentioned. You might pull up school-appropriate song lyrics and practice reading those. Anything that works for that student. This instruction time should be engaging and fun as much as you can make it to enhance their acceptance of the program, but you can support academics with your instruction time. So you can type and edit assignments. You can use educational computer games or online books. A lot of times the bargain I'll strike with my students is I get to pick the games for 10 minutes, and I might pick that math or sight word game that I know is filling in a hole that I know that student has, and they get to pick the games for the last 5 minutes. Using session time to get a jump start on homework can help your students be motivated. They like the idea that when they get off the bus, they're already done with their homework because they typed it with you. Instruction time. This can range from as little as a few sessions to years. Factors in this include age, technical aptitude, visual functioning. If the worse vision loss you have, the more likely it is it will take more instruction time for you because you're using more Zoom. So you're having to have stronger skills to do the same things that somebody who's using less Zoom might be able to do. Additional disabilities may cause you to need to have additional instruction time. And the practice and follow through that's available outside of instruction sessions is critical. So obviously if you have an unfortunate situation where a student is only using that program with you 30 minutes a week and isn't using it in any other setting, then your learning will be slower than if you've properly gotten it integrated in the classroom, in the computer lab, and at home, which is a team effort. So we have provided you with skills checklists. Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired was generous in sharing their short-term program checklist with us. There's a computer basics checklist. There's also a basic commands and Zoom text commands checklist. To compare those, we have a checklist from World Services for the Blind in Little Rock. That is what they use with adults who are working toward a career or possibly even becoming assistant technology instructors. You'll notice that the World Services for the Blind checklist is 10 pages long. That's not what we're expecting your kids to learn. Pick and choose what's relevant for your student. You don't need to overwhelm them, and like I said, you don't need to overwhelm yourself. You may want to look at that 10-page checklist to find some things that you didn't realize the program could do, and you will be able to get to electronic copies of these documents. We'll send you a link once we have it posted, so you'll be able to copy and paste what you want and don't want and make your own checklist. Maybe when you write a goal for a student, it's already ready to go. You haven't had to do anything else. That brings us to our favorite, IEP goal writing. The honest truth is that this can be challenging to write measurable goals for, just like a lot of things. Target specific and relevant skills. Examples of those skills can include locating requested buttons or links on the screen, controlling program features with mouse and or key commands, utilizing keyboard commands to move around the screen and stay oriented, and using reader functions. Please be careful when writing these goals. Be careful about writing a single goal that measures screen magnification skills and other computer skills when you're providing instruction in both. My example here is this student will use a screen magnification program to complete computer activities with 70% accuracy. What tasks on the computer are they doing? What skills will they need to use in the screen magnification program? Remember that when you're writing your goals, you need have them written so that someone else could receive that goal. Maybe that student transferred into another district and know what they're supposed to be teaching and expecting out of the student. If the student is independent with a screen magnification program, it can be used as a condition in a goal. So your example here uses it where while independently using the computer with screen magnification software, and it goes on to teach them some other keyboard commands that are program related. You need to still be careful. Be careful with goals that just measure frequency because they don't explain what exactly skills the student should master. So if I receive a goal that says this student will utilize the computer with screen magnification software for classroom activities 30 minutes or more per week, I have no idea what level of proficiency I'm expecting out of them. Can they just use the mouse to play a game? Or can they totally manipulate the program to do all the settings and do advanced features? I have provided some sample goals. I'm not going to read them word for word because you'll fall asleep. I'd like for you, as always, to tailor these to your district goal writing format. You'll notice there's a couple formats used here because I wrote them along the way for different districts. In bold is the skill like we talked about. So that first one talks about a student independently locating specific icons or links when they're asked by a teacher. The second one is using the following features of the screen magnification program. Notice I said they're allowed to use a mouse or a keyboard, so you need to be specific about what you expect out of them. The final one says the keyboard commands. Notice with both these last two, I specifically said what commands or what features. I didn't just say they can work the features of the screen magnification program. I think most people have gotten a chance to glance through their resource packet. I tried to give you as much as I could. We have a general basic keyboard commands page. We have cheat sheets for Magic. It includes some very basic JAWS commands because when people are buying that on quota funds, they're getting it together now. So I wanted you to have that on board. Supernova, Windows Magnifier, and Zoom Text. There's also the commands for Chromebook and low vision Chromebook tips. There's a very well-written document for training tips for using magnification programs that's for very basic skills. That's your very beginning, your early elementary years that document's written for. There are the list of websites that you could use for activities, and there are also those skill checklists I mentioned for you. We will eventually have electronic copies on our website, and if you need to find it, here's the link. or you can just search Lighthouse Comprehensive Low Vision Project, and you'll be able to get to the page. We will also email you when we get those up. We're going to post the resource packet and the video eventually on our website. I would love for you to share this with your colleagues. I appreciate that you're here tonight, but I'd like to spread the word for people who need to learn some of these things. And I think even some of the more advanced users might like some of the resource packet documents, even if they don't need the training. These are a few general technology resources just to point you in the right direction. Notice that sometimes your technology resources will be out of date. You have to pay attention to when they were posted. You have AFP Learn Tech. Paths to Technology is a new website being hosted by Perkins that's really exciting. I'm hoping more will get added on there. It also has a great student forum to get students engaged in technology. Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired has tons of resources, and Your Tech Vision is a website that has both free and paid step-by-step instruction for programs. You can get a lot of things free, but you may find that paying a few dollars is actually worth you knowing how to work a certain program for your student. So, talking about acknowledgments and sources, I need to give thanks to the Delta Gamma Center for Children with Visual Impairments for hosting us tonight. I'd also like to give thanks to the staff of the St. Louis Society for the Blind and Visually Impaired that came to share about their programs. I want to thank Kathy Garza and Cindy Bacafer, who were in the short-term programs at Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired that shared their checklists with me, and also Dean Ingalls, who is the Assistant Technology Director at World Services for the Blind. There's a few sources listed here. Honestly, I wasn't able to find that many sources because there's not that much current out there. That's why we want to get the word out about what we have available through this training. So, I have allowed us time for question and answer. I would love for you to leave tonight with your questions answered, so please don't hesitate to ask. If you feel like you have a very specific question that might not apply to the group and you want to ask me afterward, that's fine. If you need to sleep on it and email me tomorrow, or 4 weeks from now, or 4 months from now, I will be happy to answer those. What I most want is for your students to be successful and for you to feel confident. So there are no dumb questions, and don't hesitate to ask. So, bring them on.
With the touch screen, once he gets the Chromebook, that was one of the things we talked about, maybe one. The detachable touch screens, do they work then like a computer where they have the mouse and things? Because you're talking about moving the mouse, holding the button, and then using the keypad also.
What I've done for my students that have had that set up is I've gone ahead and gotten a USB wireless mouse. So they just plug in the little dongle into the USB, and then they have their wireless mouse as an option.
USB on the keyboard?
Yeah, it should be attached. If you're talking about a 2-in-1,
Right.
I think that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
Then you should be able to use that just fine. So I think that's a good add-on. Their keyboard should also probably have a touchpad built in. So if they wanted to, they could just stick with the touchpad. It would just depend on their skill level.
Okay.
So, sugar cone, Laura?
What is your opinion about going into settings and slowing down the mouse for first-time users or beginners?
That's an interesting idea. I haven't had a student that I felt like I had to do it for, but I'm open to that thought. What's your experience that you've had with it?
Hyperactivity. And so
And then jerking around? Yeah, so you're having to, okay.
and then slowly, my thoughts are started low and slowly increase for that.
I like it.
Okay.
I will admit to not having tried it before, because like I said, I feel like I haven't had exactly that student, but I think that's a great idea. So what Laura's saying is that you could go into like you're talking about in the ease of access settings, right?
I'm sorry, yes.
Going into the ease of access settings and changing your mouse speed if you have a kid that's just jumping all over the screen. But But you want to get them eventually up to that normal mouse speed so they can go from computer to computer without having to have that always change. And this is a complete side note, but another ease of access feature we haven't talked about that tends to come up if where kids have some orthopedic impairments is using sticky keys for these key commands I'm teaching you. If they can't hit multiple keys at the same time because of hand restrictions, you can go into the ease of access features and select sticky keys where they can hit Control, Alt, whatever they want, and have it work whether they're not holding all the buttons at once. We've talked a lot about ease of access, but I didn't tell you how to get there if you don't have a background with that. So the easiest way is just to go to the Start menu and go to the search feature and type in ease of access, and that will take you to those built-in Windows features. So
Is that just, we have 7, is that just accessibility?
you can still, it's still called, on 7 it's called ease of access also. Yeah, but accessibility might have it come up. But yeah, it's switched. XP had some other name that I forget at this point. And then after that it switched to ease of access. Anything else?
I was just curious where everybody's from.
Sounds
Right.
good.
And
I got to visit with people, so I got to cheat, but do people mind going around and just saying real quick where they're from or why they ended up here? It's a good networking opportunity. So, okay.
I'm Gwen Ray, this is my first year doing DI, and I'm nervous and scared, and I'm like, I just dropped into school, so I'm trying to learn as much as I can. Awesome.
Karen Farley with TBI, before too long. I'm Rita Orimenki, and I'm also another TBI in Fulton Hall.
I'm Kelly Quasher, I work for Special School District, and I have Ferguson, Florida, Hazelwood, Riverview Gardens, and Parkland.
I'm Maria Sipoff, and I'm from down south. There's several school districts that I work with.
I think Maria gets the longest drive of work for today. She's running to us from Cape Girardeau.
Hi, I'm Debbie Head. I'm a retired teacher with visually impaired, but I'm back working as an independent contractor, and I'm pretty much in St. Charles County and Lincoln County.
I'm Kim Head, I'm a resource teacher at Tillman in Thorson, and new student with visual impairment. We're trying to do something technologically inclined for her. She doesn't have any skills right now.
You met her gentleman from the Society for the Blind and Visually Impaired. Ms. Lloyd.
I'm Susan Lewin, and I have a son that Lawrence.
He survived. He's still in the police. Bro?
I'm Cindy Gibbons, I'm with Webster University, I do assistive technology, so I run into visual impairment issues from time to time, and just want to be, kind of brush up my skills and ask, see some things.
Well, Fox, I work at Society for the Blind, but I'm basically TBI downtown. Yeah.
a little bit farther side. I'm Jay Stover, I'm a TBI and mobility specialist, and I work for Society. And I'm, where she is, I do the mobility of the kids that she has, but the Jefferson County and down in Park Hills. I was in Park Hills. I show baby. Such a smoke screen or something.
Cindy, I remembered the beginning when you walked in, you had some questions about the versions of Zoom text. Did that get answered so far? Or do you,
I didn't ask the question, no, the Zoom text fusion,
is that what you were wanting to know?
I just want to know what the features of that were that was different.
Okay, so that makes sense now, or do you want me to review that?
Could you repeat?
Yeah, so Cindy hadn't had a student using it recently, so she was interested to know about what the difference with Zoom Text Fusion was. So that's our example of a product that has a full screen reader. So technically, if you closed your eyes, you could still access the computer without doing it visually. but it still has all those low vision options that you need. So that's going to be with your student with possibly a progressive condition or maybe greater vision loss on that. Maybe they're needing more of that 5x, 6x, and more kind of zoom role. Otherwise, you can get by with your magnifier reader or your magnifier, depending on what you're needing. And there's an article in my sources about what was added to Zoom Text for 10, the version 10, which has been around since, I guess, last year at this point. One thing that I like about Zoom Text is they don't put a new version out every single year. They update their versions, but they don't put out what feels like unnecessary versions that force you into buying upgrades. So I appreciate that. Anything else?
I was gonna wait, like, since you tapped on Zoom Text, do you know more about the merger between Freedom Scientific and AI Squared?
I don't know any insider information on how they're going to proceed with that. I know that they've fully, merged them within their parent company, that BFO company. That in addition to getting Freedom Scientific and AI Squared under one umbrella, they also bought Optelec, so they brought together two of the major electronic magnification companies too. So there's they're working hard on a monopoly, is all I can see as an outsider. So I want, before you leave, to just point out to you, in addition to your resources, you also received a brochure about the Comprehensive Low Vision Project. Almost everybody in this room has referred somebody, so I don't think you need me to explain that. But we have more on the back table if you have multiple students. You received a brochure about the various See the Future programs through the Lighthouse for the Blind. You received your flyer about the STARS Parents program. If you need more, those are on the back table. The one I put in your packet is a little bit different than what's on the back table. So if you want to look at both, you can. And just because it's unrelated, but I have to do a shameless plug, you got a Braille Brilliance flyer. I have the privilege of running the Braille Brilliance program. So you can also talk to me about that. My card's on the back table if you'd like a card in addition to what's included on the PowerPoint. So does anybody have any burning questions they want the group to hear? Or are you ready to head home? Are we, do we need people to take a cookie to go?
Laura, I think Laura will have that.
One of our coworkers had this idea to help kids memorize it. They make it a bingo game where they put the key command on the bingo board and then they pull out the name for it. So if you pull out cut, you have to look for Control B on the bingo board. So that makes it more fun and interactive. Just something practical.
That sounds perfect. I love it. And you could set it up for the ones that they actually have learned, so that's really cool. I love to get ideas from other people. Anything else? Do you have something, Ashley?
We'll take your surveys back here, and we have your certificate of attendance too, so don't forget those on the way out, and their cookies.
Thank you very much for coming. It was nice